So everyone's speakers. Yes.
Like, hold please. Okay. We'll call the meeting to order at 10:04. Sorry about the few minute delay. We're having some technical problems with the Teams meeting. There are a few people in the old link that he's going to try and get back in the other one. But in the meantime, while they're doing that, we'll go ahead and get this started and get some of the fun stuff out of the way. So we'll call the meeting to order and have a roll call, please.
Lee.
Here.
Mike.
Here.
Brian. Randy.
Here.
Tressa. Bruce. Stephanie.
Here.
Ed.
Here.
Rondalyn. And
She's
then
on the other.
she's on the other one, yes. And then we have our commissioners, Chair Kestner, and then I think
Yeah, Commissioner Lawrence.
I believe next item is discussion possible action to excuse community member absence. I believe we have one.
Yeah, Bruce reached out to me and said he couldn't make it today.
So Bruce has a personal item going on that he was unable to attend. So entertain a motion to excuse Bruce's absence. So moved by Mike. Second over there. Any discussion on that? Rick?
Randy.
Hearing no other discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. And that's housekeeping, Ms. Vanessa.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I usually have a housekeeping item. This one is it'll be similar, but a little bit different. I mentioned this to the folks in the room. So we're doing a trial run of a Teams live stream component with all of our committee meetings this season to see about getting them where they can truly be streamed and people can see them in real time. What we're finding out with the inspector committee, because the inspector committee is one that does allow members of the public just into the meeting to speak regularly, that perhaps the original method works better, because here you've got to register and you've got to do a bunch of stuff it probably is not the right fit, but we're learning that in real time. So thank you for your patience on that. So for anyone who is remote, thank you for doing the registration and everything. I know it's a little bit different. And as a reminder, if you are a committee member, it's best that you have your camera on. It is helpful to stay muted when you are not actively speaking, because inevitably it is the day that, your neighbor's lawn folks show up or something along those lines. So that just helps with the noise. If you are a committee member, or I believe in these meetings, a member of the public, and you want to speak, there's a raise hand function. So if you're using the Teams app, it's at the bottom and it's a hand, and you will raise it. Don't forget to unraise it. I think if you're using like the web browser version, there you are, Rondalyn, great. It's up top.
It's on the top.
Yeah, so it's the hand function. You'll need to unraise it. It does put it now in order of like who raised their hand first. So it'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I think is super helpful. And then for those of us that are in this room, again, this is your mic. No need to yell. Just speak normally. It's really good at picking up side conversations, so don't have those. Because that's what will get picked up and everyone will hear. And I think that's it. I introduced to Lee earlier, but I'll go ahead and introduce to everyone. We've got Pat Santos here today observing. She's going to probably be helping us out a little bit more with the inspector committee. So she's the general counsel for TALCB, and she's also deputy general counsel for TREIC. So you'll see her here. You'll get to know her. She's a delight.
And she has a sense of humor, which is required for this.
Correct.
Okay, so remarks from the chair. Again, just if you want to speak on an item, please use the raise hand function on there. I'm assuming that once that happens, you guys have the ability to unmute them, because as I'm registered in here, I can't unmute myself. So I would assume you guys have to do that. from your end?
Yeah, so I think Amber's going through and giving everyone access to that, so they should be able to unmute themselves. She's still working on you.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure if they raise their hand, I just want to make sure they have an opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so yeah, use the raise hand feature, please. And if you can remember after you speak, please put that back down. Otherwise, we keep thinking you have something else to say. All right, moving right along. Ratification of the minutes from April 15, 2024 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look and or view those? Are there any changes that anybody would like to submit? Hearing none, those will stand ratified. Item number 6, general comments from visitors or written comments on non-agenda items. B or Vanessa? Did we have one? We had comments come in. I know there was, like what Doyle was talking about, the comments that Doyle had, would that qualify under this one? Because it doesn't really have a specific agenda item to be
Yeah, I think
discussed.
that's in the material.
Yeah, number 6.
Yeah.
The supplement, in the supplement, yeah.
Yes, that'll fall into that. We just don't have any additional ones.
Okay, so for that one, we had a comment regarding, just to give kind of the short version of it, people that take ICC courses and their ability to obtain credit for that. Briefly talked with Jennifer Wheeler on that. And my understanding is we're looking into it as far as that possibility of being able to obtain credit for those, correct?
Yeah, it's not possible. The current rule doesn't allow for it.
Okay.
There is the alternative professional occupational license allowance. That is, if you take CE to support for that license, such as a plumber's license or an electrician's license or something, there is a path by which inspectors can request credit, CE credit for those. Right now, there's not. I didn't see any way ICC could get around coming to us to become an education provider, which, they certainly could. And we could approve their courses independently.
Okay.
But if you wanted us to consider something like that, I think you'd have to make it formal.
As a rule.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I was just gonna suggest education subcommittee, look
That's-
into it and
that-
maybe come back with a
I
recommendation.
would absolutely agree with that.
Yep.
I mean, it's certainly worth looking at, even regardless of which direction it goes. I think it's certainly worth looking at because I think having your ICC any code certification in there, I think can make you a better inspector by having more. So even though we are not code inspectors, but having that knowledge certainly would.
Well, I would just like to see the education subcommittee look at, really just ICC needs to be a approved provider. And as you said, approve each individual course, because there are tons of courses just like we have too. And whatever course that they want to submit, if we approve it just like any other provider.
Right, but we can't make them.
No, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, if they
Right now, they're not a preferred provider
an
or
education.
approved provider, correct?
Right.
Because none of my certificates count for anything I do with ICC.
All right. So everybody good with that, putting that on the education subcommittee? Sounds like the right place for it to be. Okay.
Okay.
There was another from Curtis Carr about SOPs. Again, it doesn't really have a specific thing. Basically just stating that let's not get too crazy when we start doing SOP changes. I think everybody who has been on this committee and been on there in the past knows that we don't get too crazy. It is not the same set of SOPs that it was back in 2012, 2013. It has substantially changed. The basic core of what was laid out is still there, but there's been substantial changes. The SOPs, they're a living document. They will always change as the industry changes, as market changes and laws change. There will always be some changes, but I think we've been pretty good so far at not going too crazy and changing them. I think, do we have anything else? Oh, the builder, talking about builders. There was another comment about builder and ICC and inspectors doing phase inspections and stuff of that nature. And we're having a brief conversation before this. Just TREIC doesn't have any governance over inspectors prior to the house being substantially completed. If that was different, that'd be one thing. But until the house is substantially completed, the SOPs don't even apply. So phase inspections, they're really up to the individual inspector if they choose to do them. Again, I think in the end, our rules do state that if you are going to do anything, you have to be competent and be able to show competence in that particular area of what you're doing. And I think that's a pretty big statement there that should something happen, you can approve that. But anybody else have any thoughts on that?
If an inspector does something on phased inspection, there's a complaint filed, would TREIC have any jurisdiction then? We're saying no, correct? Shouldn't.
To my knowledge, no,
Right,
because the house
okay.
wouldn't be substantially completed. You know, so, okay. All right. Any other item for 6? Anybody here in the room that has a comment on a non-agenda item? Okay. Hearing none. Item number 7, reports from subcommittees. Education Subcommittee.
We did not have a meeting. We didn't have anything on the agenda.
You do now.
Nothing. Give me 3 months. We'll have a report next time.
So, all right, so what about the apprentice course? The potential for an apprentice course?
Nothing has been done
Okay.
with that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we will talk more about it.
That, correct me if I'm wrong, Vanessa, but the committee had already, I believe, sort of voiced their opinion on going forward with that.
Yeah.
So there's a draft outline.
Oh,
and,
cool.
and I believe the commission's been okay with moving forward with the legislative change as well. Am I right about that?
On the apprentice.
On the apprentice.
That's on the list.
Yeah.
And there's the outline that the prior subcommittee had reviewed.
Right.
I can't remember, did it come before the full committee?
It did.
It
It
did,
did.
okay. So seems like the next steps on that would be to see what happens with session. And then, you know, to the extent that it does, I would imagine that outline gets brought back up just for a,
Final approval.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, we actually had to go back through to remember, oh yeah, we did do this, and
Yep.
this, because it's been a little bit, but yeah, you're in good shape on that one.
Okay. So just in case any of the attendees don't know what we're talking about, currently, in order to be an apprentice, there is no course requirements to do. We're looking at, though it's going to take a legislative change, correct, in order for that to happen. But in order to be an apprentice, to have an education component, so at least whoever starts off as being an apprentice will have a consistent base knowledge of standards and items that are required to be an inspector. So certainly, I think it's either 4 or 8 hours.
4-hour course is what was recommended.
So we're still looking at that, but that will require legislative change. So it is in the works. So, all right. Standards of Practice Subcommittee.
Yes, we met by phone on just on provision of the standards of practice. At this time, we don't have any changes. We did highlight a few items that we're not going to change at this time, but as we get deeper into the standards of practice, we may have to revert back to the general provisions, specifically items such as vapor barriers, visual inspection, and some roof items that came up. One of the things came up in the there was a disciplinary action that actually referred back to the general provisions in the standards of practice. So next, we're going to meet on section 228 structural systems. That next meeting is set for Monday, September 30th at 9 a.m.
Perfect. I know one of the things that I saw in there in a class that I was going through is there's a requirement talking about ventilation in the attic, but there's nothing that says that you have to report as deficient a lack of sufficient insulation.
Yeah, so as we get those specific sections, then we'll probably or may go back to look at the general provisions to make sure they match.
So I just want to mention that if we can put that in the notes. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Item number 8, staff reports, executive division.
Good morning. I'm sorry I'm remote today. I have a sick child, so I'm juggling. I'll be brief. I just want to mention a few kind of things happening with the agency. I don't have anything specific to inspectors. I did want to make sure you are all aware that we are currently going through a special purpose review by the Sunset Commission. This is very different than the Sunset review we did about 6 years ago, and is strictly related to legally required disclosures that sellers are required to provide, and the kind of forms associated therewith by TREIC. This was something that came up during the legislative session. There's a lot of conversation around certain types of disclosures. I think the legislature is trying to get their arms around what they would like to do around disclosures. And so this review will help with that. It seems informational, really in purpose, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of contention there or adversity. So we are participating in that process and providing information to Sunset. And then they have also asked for any comments by members of the public and stakeholders. So those comments will be received through July 19th, I believe. So must be received by the end of this week. So that's taking some staff effort on our end. I also wanted you to know that, of course, we're continue to work on a new database for our backend system. We've been on pause for longer than I would like, about 6 weeks or so, as we complete a change order to kind of perfect that system. I think we're days away from getting back into that implementation process, but I think that has delayed the rollout of that database into sometime spring of next year. I have not received a confirmation on kind of a new target date. But we're really excited about what that database will bring. Additional self-service options, all electronic applications and renewals. And I think it will be really good for the applicants and for license holders in terms of being able to do what they need to do really without calling in or receiving help from TREIC. So it will expand our efficiencies greatly. In the meantime, it seems that we're less efficient because we're working on that database while we kind of keep all the other balls in the air. Lastly, or almost lastly, I may have mentioned this before, but we were approached by the Texas Facilities Commission, which is kind of like the state agency that operates as a landlord for all state properties. They are responsible for the construction in the area for building new state buildings. And they are in phase 2 of a kind of a capital complex expansion. And the cranes that you see outside are to build 2 new buildings as part of that phase 2. And so Texas Facilities Commission approached us asking if we would like to be assigned space in one of those new buildings. At the last commission meeting in May, the commission accepted an assignment of space at 1501 Lavaca. And since that time, the Facilities Commission has come back to us and asked that we pivot to the other new building with a similar construction timeline, and that is 1500 Congress. So we will be bringing that to the commission in August to basically accept the new assignment of space. I think it will be really good for our agency in that we can downsize our footprint and at the same time have space that reflects how we currently work, which is in a hybrid work environment. Less dedicated office and cube space for individuals and more space for someone to come land on the days that they're in the office. We'll also have our own commission and board meeting space, which we hope can also be conducive for advisory committee meetings just like this. But we're excited about that. Timeline is way out into the future, fiscal year 2028. So that would be like a September of calendar 2027 timeline. So we're looking way ahead, but there's a lot of things to do as we do that. And then I believe all of you know, and Tony has probably had milled about the room before the start, that he has announced his retirement, which have you not said that? And I just spilled the beans, Tony?
That's okay. I was going to wait for you to do your report, then I was going to do it.
Good job, Chelsea.
It's fine.
Would you like to announce your retirement and then I'll complete my report?
Yeah, I am. I'm leaving the agency. My last day in the office will be the 23rd. My last official day will be the 31st. I've been here
Of August.
of August. Thank you. I've been here at the agency since April of 12, and almost immediately was thrown into a meeting with the inspectors and have is probably my favorite part of the job. I really have enjoyed working with inspectors. I'm going to miss you guys a lot. We've been through a lot on the committee. I think we've worked to build a really good relationship with the industry. I think there's probably still a few people that might think we're the boogeyman, but I think for overall, most of the industry understands that what our role is in comparison to them, and that's been really, really, really helpful. So I want to thank everybody for a wonderful experience here working with all of you. So
your time has definitely been greatly appreciated, and it's been a huge change from the perception of TREIC versus inspectors from 10, 12 years ago. So, and you're a big part of that. So thank you very much.
We'll miss you.
Anything else you want to spoil, Chelsea?
I want you to know that I've done so well at not spoiling anything. So it's particularly terrible that I've done so with the group that is mostly Tony. So Tony, I apologize for that. And more than anything, I wanted to mention that because I want to be attentive to what I think will probably be your next question, which is what does that mean for this committee and who will be the next Tony? And I don't think there's anyone who can fill the shoes of Tony and the work that he's done with inspectors, but we will work over the coming months to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks for the inspectors. And quite frankly, that's the reason why we've invited Kat to participate in this meeting, so that we have just kind of a broader range of people on our staff that are attentive to this work. So stay tuned on that front. I have some work to do and some thinking to do in terms of next steps. And I'm taking some time to do that. But in the meantime, want to remain attentive. So with that, I have nothing else to spoil and nothing else to report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Tony?
Hmm?
Did you have anything else?
No, I'm good.
So big, too. All right. TREIC Enforcement Division.
Yes, good
Renteria.
morning. Tony Renteria, Enforcement Staff Attorney and Liaison to the Inspector Committee. I am also working remotely today. I'm nursing a foot injury, so I'm sorry I can't be there in person. But I do want to say, just take a moment to thank Tony Slagle for all his hard work. Congratulations, and we wish you well in your future endeavors. You've done a invaluable job as part of the inspector, working for the Inspector Committee. I really enjoyed working with you. You are very thorough, very knowledgeable about the topic. It's not easy. I think everyone that works with the committee knows that is not an easy topic. It really needs a lot of time and effort, and you really have to take a deep dive into the subject. So again, congratulations, and we wish you well. And moving on to the report, since the last committee meeting, we've only had 4 enforcement disciplinary cases. They're pretty straightforward, but if anybody has any questions about any of these cases, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Anybody have any questions for Tony? Check the board. Don't see any there. Can we put out another, I know it seems redundant, but we keep running into this. Can we put out another, notification about using the right form? Because this is just stupid as it sounds. And just, we keep running into this, that people are, whether, and not necessarily something just on the website, because I'm assuming that most people that are having these violations aren't actively trying to look at the industry and seeing what's going on. But maybe an email out to all the inspectors of, hey, just make sure you're using the right form, because this is just something that just keeps coming up. This is what, over 2.5 years that we've had this form?
Yeah.
And it's still to this day.
We even had several months to transition into it.
Yeah, absolutely. There
Before
was
it
a grace
became-
period where most people just went ahead and went to 7.6, but if it's possible for us to do that. Yeah, Shannon, name.
Shannon Gatewood. I know on at least one of those, there's 2 on there that wrong report form. One of them is the software provider failed to duplicate whatever. Do we have more information on what that was? Was it a comma? Was it he used observation instead of comment? I mean, what was the software provider's lack on that one?
Tony, you want
If
to
we
touch on
can-
that?
If we know.
Or circles instead of squares.
Right.
Yeah, just give me a quick second. Let me see who
That's mine,
we're
Tony.
talking. Sonia, go ahead, Sonia.
Yeah. So let me see if, give me 1 second. Let's see here. So the inspector, his reports for the company's reports, inspection reports were maintained by a third-party company, and the inspector didn't save a copy of the inspection report in his own files. So when our when our investigator was requesting documentation, requesting a copy of the inspection report, the inspector said he didn't have it. So he contacted the third-party company that maintained all their records, and that company said that we need a subpoena to retrieve it. So we found that to be inappropriate on the part of the inspector, because they are supposed to be able to provide documentation whenever we request it. In fact, that he didn't even have a copy, we found that to be that was a problem.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, we got to keep these for 4 years, right?
Correct.
In that,
Yeah.
the time frame that we're looking at?
Yes.
That is correct. If a complaint is filed, TREIC has jurisdiction to investigate a complaint for 4 years after the date the inspection was performed.
So it's not so you can't keep it for longer, but at least 4 years, just as a quick.
At least 4 years to avoid this situation where we ask you for a copy of the report and you don't have it. Yes. And the other issue, I think the part of the question was that that there was a reproduced version of the inspection report that did not have or was not identical to the standard form. Sonia, can you comment on that?
Was not identical to the standard. He had, well, actually he had just drafted a little bit differently than the standard form, but it wasn't enough that there was a violation there. It was mainly that we just couldn't obtain the document. Like we got the inspection report from the complaint, but we also want to compare it, to what the inspector actually did.
Yeah, on this, it says that did not follow he used a reproduced version of 7.6 using third-party software that did not follow the text of the standard form, and the spacing, borders, and placement of text was not identical to the standard form.
All right, I think the order we're looking at, let me just make sure I got the right order.
This is 241684.
I'm looking at 241275. That's the one that didn't follow the standard form.
Tony, sorry if I'm in that one's
Yeah,
mine.
that's John's order. Go ahead, John.
Well, just to kind of sorry, I have a little bit of a cold and I'm losing my voice, so sorry if you can't hear me. Well, essentially this one, it is kind of a formatting issue wherein certain information such as that should be lumped under each that is required for certain systems and components were all lumped together. For example, in one section you have stuff related to the foundation and attic and the gas all lumped together in one particular section instead of being dispersed throughout the form as it should be. And all the check boxes were together in one different section for whether an item was inspected or whether it was found deficient, and then another section where the comments were. So instead of following the format of the standard form where you would have foundation inspected, whether it was deficient or not, then the type of foundation and other required information, then comments, everything was sort of formatted in a way where they were separate from each other. I don't know if that explanation makes sense or not, but it's for example, you would have information like the type of foundation was poured concrete, and then right next to that, it would have information on where he the roof covering is right below that, instead of being in each individual section where the system should be, where it should be reported.
So it says it's using a third-party software. I mean, do you know which third-party software reproduced that?
I'm not familiar with the software company that produced the inspection report.
Because depending on who that is, I mean, he could not be the only inspector doing it wrong.
Sure.
This has come up in other complaints where we found this violation. So yes, I don't know if it's a particular software company that's producing the same report that inspectors are relying on, and the inspectors are the ones suffering the violation. But at the same time, it doesn't follow the rule, wherein it doesn't follow the format of the standard report.
If I can jump in, there's been a variety of problems that arise from inspectors using software. And, this has been going on for many, many years since the software providers have been, providing these forms. Sometimes they just check the wrong box, and because they don't check the most current version, they might be using the wrong version. So the duty is on the inspector, who is actually providing the report to the client, to make sure that the report that they're providing to the client complies with the rule. And if the software is having some issues where it's not being updated, or it's changing the format of the form, the duty is still on the inspector, that before they submit their report to the client, that at the very least review the form to make sure that it is, in the format of the current form.
All right, we have a comment. Can you state your name, please?
Brad Caldwell, Greenworks Inspections. Knowing inspectors, is there any way, and I agree, I mean, it's on the inspectors in the end to make sure that you're using the right form 2.5 years in especially, but is there a way to find a list of software companies that actually provide the correct form and then provide that to the inspectors, so that maybe you can go back and put some pressure on the companies that if you're going to be operating in Texas, you need to do it this way? Or
the only problem I can see with that is if we start putting out a name of companies that do that right, then it almost comes across as we're promoting those companies and endorsing those companies. And I think that's a dangerous. I see your point. I mean, it would be nice to have that list, but I think as a governmental agency, it kind of looks like
something a trade association could do.
Right.
Right, absolutely.
But it could be a part of the, Summer's already indicated she can work on the messaging that you requested. And, I think probably the message really is you're responsible.
Yeah.
So make sure, right? Like at the end of the day, it's you. And just because their software doesn't mean, she's not gonna say it that way, but get that message along instead of picking out. Cause I see what you're saying, but from our end, that would be difficult to do. It wouldn't really be appropriate for us to do, but what we can do is message our license holders and remind them it's gotta be correct. And if you're using software, it's still gotta be correct, right? Like you're the one who ultimately has to do it.
Because Tony's right. We've had this problem for a while. There was another company that you put up and has the cute little green, yellow, and red, interface and whatnot. There was a link way off on the side to get to the actual report. And after having conversations, unfortunately, after a couple inspectors got, disciplined for that, they had a conversation with that software provider. Now there's a way that they've modified to now the 7.6 shows it first.
We actually changed the rule to require that too.
Yeah.
If you use software, that's got to, the standard form has to be the
first thing.
Right.
Yep.
Well, we're drilled this in our head when we're taking our courses to become an inspector. There's test questions when you're testing. So, I see where it should be on the inspector, not to depend on a third party, because we're told what size font, what type of font, the spacing. Everything is very detailed in your training.
Yep. No, it's the inspector, and that's who TREIC regulates, is the inspector, not the software company. So we have to look at it from these point of view. They have to be responsible for it. So, okay. Anything else, Tony?
Nothing else, unless you have any other questions.
Any other questions for Tony or enforcement? All right, we'll move on. Education and Exams Division.
Okay, that's me, Jennifer Wheeler, Director of Education and Exams. I am going to reserve my comments about Tony for his retirement party, but it has been a long and
We've had fun.
pretty cool journey. Yeah, we've been through some stuff.
We have been. It's been fun.
So with that, the education reports are included in your meeting materials and begin on page 7. Fiscal year to date, we have received a total of 17 qualifying course applications. 7 of those were new and 10 of those are renewals. During the same time frame, we have approved 220 inspector CE courses. I like to call them ICE. And then the 13-month comparison is on page 9. And there you can see a breakdown of inspector CE courses approved in each month. Past May was one of our higher volume months, along with March. All trends for this fiscal year seem to be in line with the last fiscal year and reflect a steady and healthy volume of available education for our inspector license holders. That's all I have on the reports. There is something else that I want to talk with you about, but first, do you have any questions about the education reports?
On the timeline, I know timelines were an issue there for a while as far as getting courses approved.
Oh, yes.
So do you want to touch base on that?
I sure will. We have improved those timelines significantly over the last few months. Our team has grown a little bit. We are cross-training more significantly, and our processing times are all pretty well in line with our processing goals, the measures that we have.
And just for the audience, what would be a typical time frame to expect a course to be approved from time of submission?
7 to 10 days for a classroom CE course.
Okay.
14, 15 days for a distance education CE course, 30 to 45 days for a qualifying course.
Okay.
Is that ever going to move online, or we're
Yes,
still?
with the new system, all of those applications will be moving online.
Okay, but they're still mail-in right now.
They're still mail-in right now, yes.
Alright.
Okay, so I wanted to make you all aware, if you might know this already, but there have been recent changes to the National Home Inspector exam. The EBPHI performs an analysis of the content outline every 5 years. The last time they did it was in 2019, so they did it again this year in 2024. The overall structure of the 3 domains of practice stayed the same. However, the percentage of the exam devoted to each of those 3 domains has changed a little bit. So one is weighted a little bit more, one is weighted a little bit less. Additionally, new topics were added within the 3 domains to include things like electronic vehicle service equipment, inspecting life safety equipment and systems, and an expansion to the smart home technology topic. Clarifications were also added to some of the existing topics. And based on this information, I would recommend tasking the subcommittee with taking a little bit more detailed look at the new revised content outline and
Pre-licensure.
comparing, doing we can do that as staff, certainly bring it forward to the education subcommittee, but it might be something to take a look at just to make sure we're covering all our bases in the pre-licensing courses. And additionally, I think independent of that, we can message our education providers and let them know that if they don't know already, that there have been some content outline changes to the exam and they may want to take a look and make sure they're teaching to those things.
Unfortunately, they may not change unless we actually change the rules or change the courses.
True, but we can do our best to inform.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was all I had.
So yeah, Mike, take a look at that. Good. Because that's inevitably, I mean, that's what I always hear when people take the 2 tests. The state one, it's like clockwork.
Yep.
There's so much hammered in, but that national is just so it's such a huge, wide variety of stuff to cover. So it may not be a bad idea to look at.
And to be fair, I mean, the national exam content outline does have a disclaimer on it that says, including but not limited to, just kind of giving themselves that leeway of, we might test you on some stuff that you don't
There was
see
just so
written
much on the
here.
national that we will never deal with.
Yeah.
As inspectors in Texas.
But yeah, we've got a red line version of it that, the 2019 versus the 2024, we can bring that to the subcommittee, can take a look and.
Yep. Anything else, Jennifer?
Nope, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Any questions? All right, we will move on. Licensing division.
Yes, good morning. Denise Sample, Director of Licensing. My report starts on page 13 of your materials. The initial applications received, this data is through the end of May of this year. So the bottom left of this page, you'll see the inspector applications broken down by the rank and where we compared to last fiscal year. Then the next page is a carryover because we've added some new application types that we receive. So then on page 15 of the materials, you'll see the renewal activity, and on the right-hand side is the inspector renewal rates. So it's comparing 2 years prior to the current fiscal year because every license renews on a 2-year cycle. And so we really try to hone in on those renewal rates down at the bottom as opposed to the raw numbers. So you'll see the most current renewal rates there. The next page shows the license and registration counts, and the inspectors are in the center. So we ended May with 4,644 total inspectors. That's across all 3 ranks. The next page, the graph in yellow, represents that, the inspector totals there. License holder counts, excuse me. And then the last page is the application processing time, where you'll see right in the center, we've broken out professional, real estate, and apprentice, and how long it took the licensing team to respond on average to documents received for an application. This does not include the time it takes an inspector to clear the background check or pass the exam. So this is just reviewing the documentation that's submitted. And the goal across all the application types is 14 calendar days, and we're well within that on those inspector applications. And with that, that concludes my report.
It's funny on the renewal, you look at the graph and the numbers show, 1,071 versus 912 previously, but the percentage is substantially lower. Well, not substantially, but it's definitely lower. So it's a little deceiving unless you look at the numbers. How has the pass rates, how have those, because I know you look at those on licensing and whatnot, how have those been since the pre-licensure courses have completely been changed?
I'll hand that over to Jen.
Okay.
That is something we haven't done a real study on yet. But we can do that.
I think
bring that back.
Got to that point that we've had enough time.
I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, we did want to wait at least 2 years, which it has been now. So we can take a look at that and bring it back to you.
Kind of curious to see what those rates are and what the feedback might be. And
yeah, and I'm not sure what that research will look like, but we can dig into it. I'll
kind of
see
curious.
what we can bring.
It was a huge shift in
It was.
licensure.
Right.
We had to do. We were,
And it's an important question because we did want to measure that.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm happy to look at that, bring it back to you.
Cool. Any other questions for Denise? You guys notice our active inspectors are back below 4,000 this year. Our numbers keep trickling down. But it looks like the sales agents and whatnot have finally leveled off. Kind of expected.
Yeah, the overall numbers are leveling off.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to say.
Yeah. All right. Item number 9, discussion of possible action regarding the proposed changes to 22 TAC 535.209, 535.213, and 535.214 related to the Texas practice.
Well, I'm happy to enter this, and then if you have any additional thoughts,
sure,
add those. But if you recall, this is something we presented to you at our April meeting. These were changes that you ultimately recommended to the commission, and they in turn did propose those changes at their May commission meeting. But as a reminder, these amendments primarily rearrange existing requirements, and we brought these to you to clarify that the Texas practicum is an experience requirement and is separate and apart from an educational course. And in fact, the statute characterizes these requirements as field work. So as a result of this, education providers can still offer the Texas practicum, but would no longer need to submit a course application, pay the application fee, or issue completion certificates to students. The students themselves would directly submit a credit request to the agency to obtain credit. So again, at kind of your disposal right now is whether you ultimately want to recommend these for adoption to the commission after you consider comments, have discussions, whether you have any changes to ultimately make, or whether you don't want to recommend these for adoption. But the floor is really yours.
So I know we did receive a public comment on this with a lot of information that was there. This is you know, for those that weren't here when a lot of this happened, the purpose of this was so that prior to somebody prior to this rule, you could go in, take a bunch of courses, take all the education, pass a test, and then that's it. You were completely and totally on your own in a consumer's house doing an inspection, and you have never had to have been in a house before. And so one of the big reasons why this has changed to physically get at least some experience, because we can't force an apprenticeship by state statute, that this is the closest we could get to ensuring that somebody has actually gone into a house and completed some inspections prior to actually going into a consumer's home by themselves. So I know that during COVID, we had to make some adjustments. We had a brief term where some virtual components were acceptable, but when we put that in place, we knew it was temporary. We stated very clearly that it was going to be temporary and that it would eventually go off. That has since gone off. Yes. But the intention for this has always been, and in my opinion should always be, that it is in person, physically doing the inspection every single time, to not turn this into a distance education component. That's always kind of been my piece of that. My only little thing that I saw in this rule change, and I get we're basically just moving one to another, but on page, sorry, let me get back there. See, on page 22 of 32, under agenda item I, that one. In here, we talk about the requirements, a minimum of 5 complete and in-person inspections totaling 40 hours. I'm on the right column, a couple of lines down. No more than 4 students per supervising inspector, so on and so forth. And then right below it says include a review of each inspection report, but nothing actually in here states that the student is to complete an inspection report. Could we not just add that in there just as a detail that not only are they required to do a minimum of 5 complete inspections, including a report on the current inspection form?
I am pulling up the practicum credit request.
Because this rule kind of implies that they're doing it because someone has to review it, but doesn't actually say that they should be or have to actually do an inspection report for every inspection that they do.
You remember, staff had this conversation too, and I think we ultimately settled on we think it is implied, so it may not be necessary to add, but I don't see an issue with.
Okay, I'm always looking at if somebody's trying to make an end around to something or sneak around a little rule. If we have something specifically in there that for the minimum of those 5, that you have to actually do an inspection report, and that report has to be reviewed.
Yeah.
Because minimum of 5 complete in person. I mean, to us, complete would mean the report,
Absolutely.
But we may need to spell that out in here, like 5 complete, including.
Well, it is. To your point, the language on the practicum form says the supervising inspector evaluated each inspection report for the properties listed below to ensure that each report was considered satisfactory for release to a consumer and demonstrated an understanding of report writing, client interaction, personal property protection, and concepts critical for the positive outcome of the inspection process. And the inspector provided feedback to the student. I think that's where our conversation went last time, which was, do we need to change the language in the rule, or does the report form, the credit request form by default require the review? Just through
I get it.
Reference to include a review of each inspection report prepared by the applicant.
I'm sorry?
It's the language under, I'm looking on, sorry, I can't see.
Yeah, C.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
I think, right, so.
Okay.
Is that, you think that's not enough?
I would like to see some little clarification that each inspection that was done, that a report is done for it. Because to me, if I do 5 inspections, but I did 2 reports,
Then, yeah, I see what you're saying.
then that still follows that
Mhm.
rule.
Yeah.
And then on the practicum, I can still put that they reviewed those 2 reports. But the whole intent of this was that if you're doing a minimum of 5, ideally more than that, but if you're doing a minimum of 5, that you do a full inspection report for each one that you do, and that person actually reviews each one of those. So even if it's just BI, or it says a minimum of 5 completely inspected in-person inspections, including the TREIC promulgated, most up-to-date form, if we just add that little as a non-substantive change to that. That'd be my Lord.
Yeah, and I think it may circle up again. I think we have this conversation. It's ringing a bell. And so I want to circle back up, but I'm not thinking of anything that would present that issue. And I don't think that would be a substantive change, meaning that we'd have to repropose
Right.
or anything.
Right.
Would just be in response to your comments. Yeah.
Anybody else have any?
Rhonda Lynn has her hand up.
Oh, I didn't even see it. Rhonda Lynn.
Hey, guys. So I have a couple of things. So to your point, Lee, about the inspection report for each inspection completed, I think that, if we add any language under item uppercase C, include a review of each inspection report, or for each, include a review of the report for each required inspection. And that way we're just changing a little bit of language, but not necessarily adding a whole nother item. And then secondarily, I want to make sure that I understand under the application for credit, are we relying on the student, the candidate, the applicant to verify that the supervising inspector has made the review of the work? So it's the candidate that's confirming in the application that whoever supervised his inspection actually did what the supervising inspector was supposed to do.
So I guess I kind of see your point as, we're relying on somebody who's trying to get their license and saying, yeah, everybody did it. Is there any kind of verification on the backside? Is there any follow-up on the supervising inspector to know?
That's right. I mean, I see that is where perhaps the supervising inspector or the school or whoever this candidate is going through to get the credit is necessary. I mean, not to say blanketly that people are dishonest, but why are we relying on the person who's trying to get the license to verify or confirm that their supervising inspector actually did the overview? That's all.
If I may, on that practicum credit request form, it does provide for the supervisor the supervisor of the applicants to certify that they met the requirements and provided, that they met all of the requirements for the ride-along credit.
So let's say for Hoots and Hollers, that application comes in, you take a look at it. Do you actually verify that supervisor that signed for it actually is eligible to be a supervisor in that scenario, having 5 years of experience, at least 200 inspections?
No.
But there is the audit ability. So there is that audit language in the rule, which isn't new, but it allows us to audit that information provided on the form to verify that they're in compliance with the rule.
Which is random and not standard for each one.
Like that it's not done on every form, correct? Yeah.
And to Ronald's point, I can kind of see that if, let's say 20 applications come in and you audit one of them and one of them is bad, what about the other 19? Who's to verify that those other 19 actually had good inspections that were done by people that are qualified to teach the practicum?
So you're saying you don't use a list of approved sponsoring inspectors? To do that?
I know to sponsor an apprentice, I had to submit a list of at least 200 inspections. But we're saying that it's just kind of the honor system. Anybody with 5 years of experience and 200 inspections can do a practicum, or does it have to be somebody who is submitted and is a qualified sponsor? the 200 inspections.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was.
It's, yeah, I mean, it states that you're required to have at least 5 years of experience or like 200 inspections as a Texas professional inspector, I believe is what the verbiage in there. But to Ronald's point, it's like, if there's no accountability for that, who's to say that, you know, someone who isn't qualified signs off on that? And if it doesn't get audited, that person just kind of slips through the cracks. And
Because if we went off the 200 inspections where you have to submit the form, isn't there a database where you could just search our name and say, oh, they've got the 200 inspections?
You might
You know,
Do you want me
or
to?
do you have to be like?
Yeah,
the-
because I think I might be conflating the two, the requirements to perform the practicum and to.
It looks like Roy Carter has his hand up. What do you say, Roy?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. In regards to what's currently being done, I know that the staff, I know that went away from staff having to qualify if the person that you're going to be utilizing is doing the Texas practicum. That all fell to the schools. And then currently, we would approve to make sure that that person is meeting the 5-year requirement as well as the 200 inspections. And we also are the ones that take a look at their inspection reports and everything to make sure that their reports are even in compliance with the standards of practice, and they are using the promulgated REI 7-6 form. This situation where any inspector could still offer those practicums, but most people will go through a school because then they know that the school is pretty much taking care of making sure that that person that's providing that service actually meets the qualifications, because it always fell to the backside of the schools to make sure that that was done. And I know for us, that's going to still be the intent for us to continue offering, is to make sure that that professional meets it. I don't know how you could actually, staff could actually go through and audit everybody to see if they're actually meeting that. And I think that's why it was changed to put it on the backside of the schools.
And I think if they go through the schools, that's reasonable. I think the concern is you go through a different school. I understand how your school works and I completely get where you're coming from. But somebody who does a different school that doesn't have that component, because there are some schools that don't offer the practicum. They're like, hey, we've done all this education. You got to go do the practicum on your own. What's to keep them from just going find, Billy Bob down the road who says, yeah, I'll sign off on it. And where's the accountability for that? And before I go too far.
I concur with what you're saying, Lee. And that was my argument when we went to this practicum at the very beginning. When we went away from the experience requirement and we went to the practicum, I said, who's going to oversee anybody that says that they're eligible to perform this service? And y'all's comments was the affidavit that is on the backside of the practicum form. When they sign that says that they stating that they have met the requirements. And then that's how staff would go about if there were any complaints in dealing with that inspector.
If they make a false representation, then that would become an
Correct.
enforcement.
Got his hand up. That might be.
Tony, go ahead.
Hello. Yes, that's actually the same point I was going to make, that there is an affidavit that is required to be given. I don't remember the form, but I remember us talking about this issue previously and how we were going to make sure that everything was correct. And so I think the form itself does contain some measurement of accuracy and safety. And then the point is that we do have jurisdiction over this particular situation where they may make a misrepresentation of fact, and it's in the rule 535.213 section D. So I think there is a mechanism by which we can enforce a misrepresentation. But again, I think there is some safety precautions in the form and including the affidavit. I just don't recall offhand what the form says.
We can But I'm sending it to Amber.
There may also be a pretty straightforward check that could be licensing numbers, because you can track when that person was licensed by a year and use that as a cutoff.
Is that, is on the form, that supervising inspector, is their license number part of that?
Yeah, Amber's about to put it up on the screen.
Could be as simple as saying.
At least it would be the 5-year requirement.
The 5-year, right?
Sure, yeah.
Well, that actually, if I may, that the requirement is 5 years of active time. And active licensure time is something that's not calculated in any kind of automated way currently. Any request for a history that shows how much active time a license holder has so far is manually prepared, because it requires research into the historical tables in the database.
So on the bottom, it does say inspector license number. So that is.
The information is collected.
So I think this is a good conversation. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time in trying to fix a problem that may not actually exist. I don't want to do that either. I can see there's a potential loophole, and Roy, you're right. You did mention it before, and I think we had the same conversation. I guess if we start seeing some disciplinary actions coming through that somebody got a license and basically fudged the information, we can possibly look at that. But I don't want to go off and start changing a whole bunch of things to fix a problem that may not actually exist.
I mean, easy way to do it, just do like sponsoring inspector for an apprentice. Just if you're gonna do a practicum, you've got to submit your list of 200 and just like to sponsor an apprentice.
Yeah, that list is already there. Why don't you?
Yeah, just
we have
be
to
a qualified sponsor.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not hard.
Did you have something? Go ahead.
Yeah, it kind of.
State your name.
Oh, sorry, Shannon Gatewood. Kind of trailing off a little bit on just a question on the process of a candidate. I know it's changed a little bit with the qualifying education changes and stuff. When does the candidate have to submit fingerprints and background check? Is that after practicum? My concern is the times I've done it, I've only taken them to vacant houses because I just don't want to deal with occupied houses. But then it gets my gears thinking of, well, if people are taking them into occupied houses, I don't know who these 4 guys or however many guys I have, and I'm keeping an eye on them, but that's not to say, I hope that they're good people, to where at least if they have the background and the fingerprint, at least we have a little bit to fall back and a little bit more surety of their not qualifications, but their.
Well, they aren't even going to know when you do the fingerprint background check. You're not going to know until somebody comes back and says, you've been nixed or you can't apply for this license.
In years past, we've made a concerted effort to communicate to get the fingerprint background check process started sooner rather than later, because it can take a significant amount of time because we are relying on.
And if we aren't going to keep them from spending all the money on getting all the classes.
Exactly. And so that's been part of the push that we've sent out to applicants to get the fingerprint process started sooner, but there is nothing that requires a certain sequence of events other than specific coursework before different sections or different exam parts are to be completed. And it is essentially a checklist. All of the boxes, all of the requirements have to be met before a license can be issued.
I think too, if I remember this conversation, and I'll try and go back, what we've really struggled with the practicum is trying to figure out where it belongs, because we were struggling with, well, we don't license instructors, and so these folks aren't, well, no, we don't regulate the instructors. We've got folks who are just inspectors who are trying to do this, right? It's hard enough to find folks that will do this, and then you don't want to require them to have to get that to become a provider. And so it was sort of really in this middle ground with the practicum. And so what this change was born from was us, I mean, all of us, right? Like we've been talking about the practicum and this form for a long time. And where we finally have landed with this shift is, wait, it's an experience requirement. That's why we're struggling with trying to regulate it and fit it as a course, because really it's an experience requirement. And by putting it under experience and by having, and I'm not saying we can't tinker with the practicum form, but where we landed with that credit request form was a way for us to enforce just an inspector who's taking these folks along on the practicum, right? Because they're not a provider. It's just getting real murky in that regard. So now we've got a practicum form where they have to certify that they meet the requirements and that they did what they were supposed to do on this practicum. And to the extent there's an issue, then we've got that, right? So it actually ends up, it's not a perfect landing, but I think it is a significantly better landing, right? And we can always look at that form, and if we want to make adjustments to it, down the road, we can. But here, if you look at moving the practicum to that experience requirement, which is really what the rule is doing here, and with a note about the inspections, you're pulling it out of that world where we couldn't quite figure it out, and we're placing it as truly an experience requirement that we know we have enforcement authority to go after both that inspector and if the applicant submitted false information, right? I think we're in a better spot than we were.
What if we were to put on the form where the supervisor or the guy who is running that, if we were to put on there, I certify that I have 5 years or 200 inspections or whatever we have put in as those requirements, that they sign off.
That's at the bottom.
But everything is there.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it says,
As long as it's.
I hereby certify that all Texas
I can see it in
practicum
the-
requirements. Yeah, no. I hereby certify that all Texas practicum requirements have been met, and that's in bold. And I am qualified to instruct the 40-hour practicum because, we may need to change that a little bit. I have been actively licensed as a Texas professional inspector for at least 5 years, and I have the 3 years, and I perform. So they are having to certify, their ability to provide the practicum and that they have done it in accordance with the rule, which is great from a regulatory standpoint.
Yep. Because then you have two parties that you can hold accountable
We got it.
on one form.
Right. And now that it'll be under experience, I think it really eases up a lot of, we've all been going back and forth on this of like, how are we gonna, and I think this is it. And we can revisit the form and everything, but first step is getting that rule.
Because I think if we start going too far into requiring, going back to requiring them to go through the process and everything else, then you start having the argument about barriers to entry and limiting the options for who can do those practicums and whatnot, which was the original argument when all this started. Fortunately, it didn't amount to anything because there were plenty of people that were teaching that, able to teach that practicum.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
About the idea of backgrounds and fingerprints?
Sure.
Is that required then to be able to start the practicum?
No, it's just part of the application process. So there are X number of requirements you have to complete in order to get your license, and one of them is the fingerprint and background check. I don't think there's a particular, and I think that's what they were saying, is there isn't a particular point at which they're required to do that, but they're recommending that they do it earlier in the process. Because occasionally a background check comes in and it's going to be something that we're not going to approve as a license. And if you can get that earlier, so you aren't having to spend that money on doing those courses, that's probably going to be better.
If you look at the,
Right.
yeah, if you look at the verbiage on the website, everything, it's where the placement is. It's all about encouraging people to take that step as soon as possible to get their fingerprinting, their background check completed.
And Tony?
Yeah, just I agree with all the comments that were made. I think this form is appropriate. It does fulfill our purpose. We want to encourage these type of the practicum experience. And at the same time, this certification at the bottom, I think it provides sufficient reassurance that the person is qualified, because it is a very straightforward language. When they read it, they'll know if they qualify or not. And I think it's a sufficient deterrent from wrongful conduct, because they don't want to jeopardize their license just to help someone with a practicum. So the consequences could be pretty dire for someone to make a a willful misrepresentation. Plus, like Lee said, this is not really an issue that we ran into in the past. So in my opinion, I think this form kind of satisfies our concerns, and I think it's appropriate to deter any wrongful conduct.
Anybody else have?
I've got
Yeah.
one question. At one point when we were talking about this, we talked about specifying five inspections on 5 different properties. Because there was some discussion about what's to keep somebody from doing the same house multiple times. And I don't know if that's something we decided not to worry about, but I can't see, is there anything up above that? Or is that not something to worry about? Yeah, they do. But if it doesn't say 5 different ways,
Is there any,
let's say an address.
is there anything in the rule that actually states you can't put 3 of the same address on the same one?
If I may, when that conversation happened previously, I did reach out to my team that processes the inspector applications. And as you're aware, they're not that high of a volume. So if something had come through that had a repeated address, that would have been escalated up, to, hey, can we accept this? So in just an informal kind of polling of the licensing staff that processes those applications, they said they'd never seen a repeated address, maybe a unit A and a unit B that might catch an eye, but informally or anecdotally, they've never seen an address repeated.
So it's not a problem we need to worry about.
It does not appear to be.
And if
an
it comes
issue.
up, we can always correct it. All right, so anything else? 9? So what we're looking at is a motion to recommend for possible adoption with the verbiage change about an actual inspection for a report for each inspection. So I would entertain a motion for that modified agenda item number 9.
So moved.
So Randy, second. Any other discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion passes. Item number 10, discussion possible action regarding recommendations related to standards of practice 22 TAC 535-227 and through 535-233.
And the thought behind this one of keeping this as a standing item, I know Randy gave the report. They're moving on to, is it 228 next? Just if anyone has anything they would like to say, hey, take a look at this, or what about this? Just keeping that as a standing item of where we're headed next.
So I know that I've been trying to push out at different meetings and everything that I go to and social media stuff, trying to encourage inspectors to get involved in the process of changing the SOP, because a lot of times we go through this process and nobody says a word until right before adoption. That's usually kind of the way that works. But fortunately, it looks like people are listening, because we actually got some public comments about, hey, don't go crazy on the SOPs, which was not the intention to go crazy on the SOPs. It's just to get people involved. So fortunately, it looks like the word is getting out. So I would encourage all committee members to go out to their sphere and encourage participation. I think the more participation we have, the better. We're always going to get some good suggestions and some maybe not so good suggestions. But it's always good to look at all of them and just kind of see what might be in the best interest of the consumer before we do this. So the review is something that happens constantly. The SOPs will always be under review in some way, shape, or form. So we always just try to keep that up.
And we'll continue to push for comments as we go with each section. So we'll do one for 228, like we did for 227.
And just for those that are listening, this is not a quick process. This is something that takes a good amount of time. We don't shove anything down anybody's throat. We don't force rule changes. The intent is not to just blow the SOPs up and start afresh. I think we have a really good set of SOPs, but there's always some tweaking and some changes that will happen. But definitely get involved if you're interested. Yes.
Once again, Shannon Gatewood. Sat in on the SOP subcommittee. And one of the things that was brought up, and I just want to try to get clarification now, or just knowledge of what we can look for on the subcommittee stuff. On the routine departure, we have to notify the client or prospective client prior to the inspection. In which way? Because I've seen people say, oh yeah, I just put it in my inspector agreement that, yeah, I don't climb roofs. And they sign it, so they must have read it, right? And I don't know if that hits the intent and the spirit of notifying the client. Is it supposed to be verbal? Is it supposed to be in writing? Is the client supposed to sign their life away saying, I understand that you don't climb roofs? Well, where's the line on that?
Good question. It is a good question because I've seen that. I've saw an inspection report come through where it says right on the roof section, this inspector never walks the roof. It is not required by TREIC standards. And I just kind of had a headache. I had to take, take pill for, but I mean, it's a viable question. I don't know, Tony, what do you, Renteria? Do you have a thought process on that?
Yes, yes, I was looking at the language of the routine departure, and it doesn't state that it needs to be in writing. However, keep in mind that if the way it works is that the client would be typically the one saying, hey, you didn't notify me and I didn't know about this, and they would probably be bringing the complaint. So it would be up to the inspector to prove that, yes, I did. Here's this text message, here is this email. So I did notify you, so that's the burden of the inspector, that if they depart, it's up to the inspector to provide that notice. Is it in writing? If they notify because there's different ways to do it. They can certainly notify the client based on the language verbally, and if the client acknowledges, that's fine. They could put it in the contract. They could put it. Sometimes they do it in the advertising. I don't inspect, these type of roofs, etc. But certainly it's up to the inspector to protect themselves, that if they're providing this notice to the client, that they can prove that they did so if an enforcement action is filed against them.
So my concern is that there are a number of inspectors that put things in that service agreement or that agreement, knowing that that client is not going to read it, and kind of using that as the fallback. What if, just throwing this out there, what if we were to treat this as kind of like the IABS on the realtor side and say at first substantive contact with the client, that if they routinely depart from a component of the SOPs, that they inform their client at the first substantive contact?
What does that look like?
Well, it's like on the agent side, anytime you have a discussion about, employment of services, getting into a buyer representation agreement or leasing agreement or whatnot, that first conversation that you have, which typically is that first phone call. Hey, I'm calling around, I'm shopping around for inspection. Great. Here's what I do. Here's what I don't do. I don't walk the roof, whatnot. So that client knows right off the bat that they were done. And then they can still have it in their service agreement as an added protection.
Well,
if you,
Lee,
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just thinking that looking at the language of this section, that it says if they have reason to believe that it includes the component or system that they routinely depart. So I'm thinking of when they get to the property, if they don't know that this particular issue is part of this inspection until they get there, then they're still obligated before they proceed with the inspection to notify the client. So that would be after the first substantive communication.
Right, but that falls under A. And I think that's covered in A. So if I go up and I normally do climb a roof and I go up to a house and I pull up and it's got a pretty darn steep pitch or it's got ice on the shingles or whatnot, then yeah, then that falls under A, that at the notify the client earliest practical opportunity, that I'm not going to inspect that. But I'm talking about the guys who literally say, I do not walk roofs, even a 412 roof.
And obviously every house has a roof. So I guess that situation would be, I think sometimes the situation will fall under A and section 3, but obviously if they have a departure on a roof in general, yeah, that should probably, I mean, it'd be best to do it at their first opportunity where the client could say, well, in that case, I'm not going to hire you.
Yeah.
It's something that the earlier the better, but again, that's something that we would have to look at in the SOP committee regarding maybe changing the language. And keep in mind this language, something to consider. I think we really need to look at the language carefully, because this departure provision does create some misunderstanding at times from inspectors, especially early on, until they get the hang of it, how to properly depart. So I just think we need to maybe debate it a little bit, review the language, whatever we want to change, and but certainly we can certainly discuss that in the SOP subcommittee.
Okay. Rhonda, I saw you had your Ronaldin, I saw you had your hand up.
I was just going to say that, A requires earliest practical opportunity. So if I routinely depart from anything, earliest practical opportunity is when they call me to schedule an inspection. If I believe the house is going to have a roof, earliest practical opportunity is when they call to schedule an inspection. And this is what, when I'm teaching standards of practice and when I'm teaching legal and ethics, we're saying this happens when somebody calls you and wants to engage you to conduct an inspection. Now, as far as item number 3, it's still saying, look, if you get there and there's something you routinely depart from that you didn't expect to be on site, then don't start the inspection. And I think that it is up to the inspector's discretion as how that inspector wants to minimize their liability with regard to how they're going to notify the client one way or the other of what they are going to depart from that is otherwise required by the SOP.
My thing on that is I see A and that section A and section 3 as two completely different things. I think we all, as inspectors, we run into something, we walk up, we can't get to it. We can't inspect the electrical because all their storage is in front of the panel. It's something we don't routinely deviate from, but because of the situation when we got to the house, we can't.
I think that's covered by B, and that's also covered by our definition of accessible.
Right, and but my point was that's not what I was getting, or I think what Shannon was really getting to is it's the routinely depart. That's really the key, and how do we address that? Tony, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, whatever you guys decide to do, and it sounds like you're on this, but just be careful, because this is the 3 is a big time consumer protection thing, which is don't do the inspection. You can't do the inspection until that gives the client the ability to say, well, I want this done and I don't want you inspecting the house, then it goes someplace else. So I think to Tony's point about the roof, I don't know if this would be considered a routine. Let's say there's a specific grade that you don't want. Is that something that you would routinely put in your, I don't walk grades? Or is that something when you show up to the property, you notice you're like, oh, this is, I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is what you don't want the danger to be is then that falls into section 2 instead of 3 when it should have been under section 3. So that person knows, oh, the client knows I have the opportunity to go to somebody else who does do the specific thing.
And I think there are, I think with 3, there are inspectors that I don't walk roofs. Right. Also, and we're picking on roofs, but foundations is another one. Mm-hmm. I do not crawl under houses. I do not do pier and beam. But if they aren't telling their client at that first substantive contact,
release valve.
Do what?
Safety release valve is another
T&P valve. Yeah, absolutely. That's something that you routinely depart from. That's something that they should notify. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'd like to see that from the public standpoint. I'd like to see that as inspector notifies the client written, verbally and in writing, right? Because if it's in the contract, then I can know that I'm signing the fact that and I know I'm not paying for that, you're not doing that. If I don't like it, I'm not signing it. Right? But you also have to tell me, right, that you're not doing that. I think that's where the routinely, I agree with you. I think routinely is the issue. If there's 10 things on your routine list that you will not do, maybe you're not the right person for it.
Right. I mean, my goal is that if that inspector is not going to be inspecting the roof, that consumer on the day of inspection knows that guy's not going to actually walk through. If he's going to use a drone or he's going to do whatever the case, but he's routinely departing. And I know that before going in. I think that's really what the intent of that whole thing is. So, all right. I don't want to beat this too much into death, but if you guys can take a look at that in the verbiage as part of the review, I think that's.
Yeah, that came up here. I got all kind of chicken scratch on here about the departure provision. So
Yeah. So that's
going to come up when we get into the actual section, whether it's electrical, structural, whatever it is.
Okay.
That's why I say we may have to go back here and tweak this once we get into the guts.
It's a valid point. We need to address that. That's it's been there. All right. Anything else on item number 10? Okay, hearing none. Item number 11, a request for future meeting agenda items. Obviously, we're still probably going to keep the SOP stuff going on there. Any other items that we have that people would like to see on a future agenda? All right, now the fun part. Discussion possible action regarding future meeting dates. We have tentatively, or confirmed, October 14th, Columbus Day, as our next meeting. Is everybody okay with October 14th, Monday, October 14th as being our next inspector committee meeting? All right.
Tony, you okay with that?
I'm good.
Tony is okay with that. Tony is okay with that.
It's just funny. It's Columbus, obviously.
It almost always is Columbus Day.
Columbus Day is always a Monday, so
Yeah.
it's always that.
Yeah. It's funny. You're right. It is almost always. All right. So then we will look at the first quarter meeting for 2025. We're looking at two options, some options. Tuesday, January 21st at 10, or alternative dates as Wednesday, the 22nd, or Thursday, the 23rd.
And is the 20th a holiday?
The 20th is Martin Luther King Day.
Okay. The agency's closed.
I cannot do that whole week.
Where will you be?
I will be on a ship in the Southern Caribbean.
I can do the 21st as long as I'm back in Rockport by 5 o'clock, which shouldn't be a problem.
So I will let you all decide what might be the best option for there, because I won't be there that week or the week before.
21st is good.
Wait, did we talk about this the last time? Because I have the 27th as our next inspectors committee meeting in January. Did we talk about this?
We did talk about that. I'm just not seeing it on here, but that's what I had too.
Because I have it on my calendar already that we talked about this and decided to move it back a week.
I had it as the 27th also.
Let's check the minutes.
Because I think that next week, Brian Carroll can.
That's right. Oh, that's right. That's right. So.
The third Monday is.
Yeah. Not at all.
Yeah, I can do the 27th. I can't do that week previous.
You can't call in from the boat.
The Wi-Fi on the boat is usually not very good.
When do we normally calendar in January? Is that right? For the year.
I think we were just trying to get that first one on there because some people like to schedule out further in advance.
Yeah.
I think our normal time is the third Monday, but it's pushed to the Tuesday to the MLK Day.
Right.
And so we have a conflict that, one person can't do it one week and another person can't do it the other week. And so I think we're gonna try to set the January one and then going forward, get the rest.
That's right.
Which is as a heads up, normally third Monday in January, April, July, and October.
Because I remember the conversation we had about the 27th, we were talking about the subsequent TREIC meeting, the commissioners meeting. And was there enough time? And there was, if we had done the 27th, but not later in that week. So that's why I had it in my calendar as 27th. So
Did everybody else have it in their calendars? That's 27th?
I have it in mine. Did anybody else put it in there?
That was where I remember from the minutes ending up.
We were, and then it's,
Is there a problem with doing it on the
that's what
27th?
I'm trying to figure out.
Okay.
Well, I think
There's no problem with it.
Right, so then I think the last thing was we were gonna send a.
Right, but then we decided not to send the poll.
Because the calendaring's done on that.
Yeah.
No.
He wanted it for the whole
Right.
year.
Right.
So we could send a poll just for January, or you can see right now if there's consensus on the 27th or the 20th, or the 21st, sorry. It's up to you. I mean, does everybody who is a member that's here prefer the 27th? Or prefer the 21st? Is there, I mean, I know.
Or have conflicts.
Or have conflicts, right, that's I was like, some people calendar the 27th, right?
That's fine, add off.
No issues with the 27th.
Okay.
Look at that.
You want to set it for the 27th and then we can revisit?
Yeah, set it for the 27th, then we can look at that.
Does that work for you?
And at our next meeting and see if we run it.
Yeah, see where we are then.
All right. I think we're good there. Anybody have anything else? All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining online and for your input. It's greatly appreciated. Keep an eye on the TREC website for upcoming SOP and education subcommittee meetings that may come up, as those are public, and we absolutely welcome the interaction that's there. And, just a footnote. Thanks, Tony, for everything. Seriously, it's been a pleasure. And I greatly appreciate the time and effort that you put in for this committee. It's definitely not gone unnoticed.
Thank you.
And we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
With that being said, 11:36, we will adjourn the meeting.